All right, I kind of just wanted to talk about the Wild and where they're at after the trade deadline. Got my Mikael Granlund jersey. I know he's no longer on the team, but I'm a big fan of him. I liked him on the Wild. Got my A's hat, North Stars colors. Their throwback reverse retro jersey was close to these colors. So where are we at? The lines are pretty much the same as they've been. You got Kaprizov on the top line. He's a left winger. Hartman centering the line with Zuccarello on the right. Again, this is a 2A, 2B line. The second and third lines interchange depending on their opposition, who they're playing, how the game's going. Foligno on the left wing with Eriksson Ek centering and Greenway on the right wing. This is their shutdown line. They play against every team's top scoring line, and they're very good and very successful playing against those lines. It's incredible. They're all excellent defensive players, and they can score too. You got two 20-goal scorers, and Greenway is finding a scoring touch, and he's been driving to the net more. So that's fun to see. Next up, you have the Gaudreau centering the Fiala and Boldy line. Boldy's been out with an injury. It seems to be a minor injury. He should be back fairly soon. So it's caused a little bit of a mix-up. Jost recently in the last game has been a winger on that line, the right wing. Scored a goal. Actually looked really good in that line. I think he was excited to not be on the fourth line. It's been a while for him. He played an excellent game, so that's what you want to see out of a young guy. You traded Nico Sturm for that. A lot of people were skeptical of. His face-offs are rough. They need a lot of work. He's not good in the face-off dot. So moving him to the wing, I think, is a good choice. He might just be a winger going forward. We'll see what happens. But regardless, he usually centers the fourth line. Delorier's become a staple on that left wing, and Brandon Duhaime, he's a rookie. I love him. When he first got called up, he really had the scoring touch going, and he's kind of lost that. But he's throwing hits, he's playing great defense. There's nothing to complain about. For depth, they have Bukestad, who, because of Boldy's injury, has been centering this fourth line. They have Connor Dewar and Marco Rossi. Dewar, could get called up if there's an injury or whatever. Rossi, probably unlikely to be called up until next year. I think he played one game, maybe two, in a Wild uniform this year. He looked good, but he's still young. They want to develop him right and take their time with him. And so I'd be surprised if Rossi gets called up. But you got Bukestad and Dewar, and they're both NHL ready. Dewar might benefit a little more from staying in the AHL, so hopefully no injuries happen. But he can be called up, and he's been fairly successful at the NHL level. So in net, they got Fleury and Talbot. Both have been playing excellent hockey. Fleury's been putting on a clinic since coming into Minnesota, and Talbot has had incredible numbers as well. Talbot seems to play well when there's a goalie competition going on, and he always makes the case to be the number one goalie. But as soon as that other goalie drops out and Talbot's the number one guy, his play tends to decline too. So it's really interesting. It's fun to watch. But they're both playing incredible hockey right now. They're at the top of their games. At this point in the season, it's the best 1-2 punch in hockey. You can make that case for some teams, but I think right now Minnesota owns that. It's become the story. Over on defense, you have Goligoski and Middleton on a first pairing defensive line with Spurgeon. Goligoski's been playing on the third line and been a healthy scratch as of late. He's been one of their best defensive players all season. He's leading the defensive core in points. He's leading them in plus-minus. He's leading the team in plus-minus. He's had some really solid games and some solid play. They acquired Jake Middleton from San Jose. He's got the sweetest mustache. That's a throwback to the Cal Clutterbuck days in Minnesota. I love it. I hope he never gets rid of that mustache. It's awesome. I love his stash. But he's played actually really well. He's a young guy. He hasn't played much in the NHL. They're probably going to play him from here to the rest of the season, so he qualifies as a restricted free agent. If he doesn't, I forget how many games he has left to play, but if he doesn't play enough games by the end of the season, he becomes was it a G8 unrestricted free agent, meaning he can sign anywhere. He's not a restricted free agent, even though he's still under NHL age. But he's been excellent on that blue line. He's been throwing some hits. I don't think he's had a fight yet. He's a big dude. He can drop the gloves, but I'm a big fan of his game, and I think Spurgeon has been an awesome partner for him. Spurgeon and Goligoski, too, are fantastic together. So I think once the playoffs start, I wouldn't be surprised to see Goligoski on that first defensive pairing line and Middleton drop to the third line. We'll see. But on that second line, hasn't changed throughout the whole season. It's Brodin and Dumba. Excellent pairing. They play off of each other so well. They play very different styles of games, and they know how to kind of compensate for each other. Dumba likes to drive into the offensive zone. Brodin is an unbelievable defensive player. Great defense, provide a little bit of offense. And Dumba, when he's in the defensive zone, 98% of the time is providing elite defense. There are times where, he should be making a stick check. You can get into the details, but you can say that about almost any defensive player. That Brodin and Dumba line is a mainstay. Their chemistry is fantastic. They're both excellent players. If they were to go to any other team, Brodin is no question a first-line defensive player. Dumba is a 1A, 1B first-line defensive player. So their top four is really strong. On the third line, again, you got Goligoski, been playing on the third line a bit with Kulikov. John Merrill's in there as well. John Merrill, I like his game a lot. Kulikov's really come into his own since the year 2020 started. He can play a left-hand and right-hand shot defenseman. Really useful, really beneficial for the Wild. He's done a really good job doing that. He provides a little bit of offense, provides good defense. He's definitely a third-line defensive player at this point, but no question, an asset, not a liability. There really hasn't been defensive liabilities too much on this team this season. It's been awesome. You got Jordy Ben and Kalen Addison. Addison's in the AHL. Jordy Ben's just healthy scratch. Jordy Ben hasn't had the greatest season. He's probably not back next year. Addison's a young dude, really young, good, promising prospect. Played a few games in the NHL this year. Looks good. Again, young, making mistakes that young defensemen do. But I think his future is very bright. I think more often than not, we'll see Merrill get scratched. It'll be Merrill and Kulikov, but I think Merrill will get scratched in the playoffs. Middleton will play on that third line with Kulikov, and first line will be Goligoski and Spurgeon. We'll see. Dean Evason always likes to surprise us somehow. Even when he's banging out the same lines, there's still some type of surprise in there, so it's fun to watch. Let's talk about the newcomers. We'll start with, we already kind of discussed Jost, so I guess and Middleton. I guess we'll just discuss Delorier then. Delorier's game is a lot better than I anticipated. I thought he was going to be more of a goon, so to say. Big dude, probably just there for enforcement and to hit, and that's it. I've been utterly impressed with his offensive zone presence, and he's a good player. He throws a lot of hits. He knows his role. He'll drop the gloves, and he does that. And that's fun to watch, and he's a really good sport about it. But he's always smiling on the bench. He's incredible on defense. He's a good penalty killer. But he's had some breakaways. He's had some really good positioning where if a pass made it through a defensive player, probably wasn't the best pass, that would have been a goal for Delorier. So it's encouraging to see. I'd like to see him more on the score sheet, but I don't think that's his fault. It is what it is. Playing limited minutes on a fourth line as an enforcer role, kind of reminiscent of Sean Thornton, but I think Delorier is a little more skilled than Sean Thornton was, and I love Sean Thornton on the Bruins. So I can't. Delorier's kind of blown me out of the water. I was not expecting him to be this good of a player. I've seen him play in Anaheim, and he's kind of just a goon, but he's got a good game, and that is an incredible pickup by Bill Guerin. Fleury again, he might be rejuvenated by going to a new team, to a GM he knows, to a very welcoming team and organization. Most are, especially if you won the Vezina Trophy last year and you're a future Hall of Famer. But Fleury's a very modest dude. He's not a big ego guy, and it's a family in Minnesota, which I remember in Boston maybe 10 years ago, it was a family. Now it's more like it's like business family, and I don't know. It's just the atmosphere in Minnesota in that locker room is fantastic, and Fleury's a great addition to it. And Fleury and Talbot have both been excellent sports about sharing the net. When you're the reigning Vezina winner and a Hall of Famer in net, most goalies would be like, I'm the better goalie, I should be playing more games. But Talbot, also an all-star this year, playing lights out, has been the starter for the Wild for the whole season. Has also been a good sport. They have a really good relationship, so that's encouraging to see. So kind of a look into their records versus different conferences or divisions. We'll start in the West. Central Division, in which they lie. They're 10-8-1. Not that great. I was kind of shocked. They still have a lot of games to play in the Central and Pacific, so I'm sure those. Hopefully, it gets a little better. But after kind of digging into it, the Wild play really well against playoff teams, and for some reason, it's like they go like 500 with teams that have already been eliminated from the playoffs, for example. So if Minnesota can get out of the Central, just based on the stats, I think that'll be their toughest task. They've shown with this new roster that they can definitely compete with Colorado. There's no question about that. I think that'll be a great series. It'll probably go to 7 games. It might not. Those things surprise you. Like the Wild could win in 6, or the Avalanche could win in like 5. Sometimes you can't predict that stuff, but I think the Wild have a really good shot if they get to Colorado to upset Colorado. That would not surprise me. But I think it's going to be tougher getting to Colorado. They're probably either going to have to go through Nashville or St. Louis, and the records against those teams aren't great. They'll see both those teams at least twice throughout like the last 14 games of the season, or however many they have left. That'll be a good indicator as to how they'll do in the first round. I think they'll play St. Louis, and I don't know. St. Louis and Nashville both can play a physical game. They're very similar to the Wild. I think the Wild have a little more toughness, but that's not to say that the other two teams are slouches. Nashville they've been notorious for being one of the toughest teams this season in the NHL. And again, St. Louis is no joke. They have a lot of tough guys. You got Ryan O'Reilly leading that team in the center position, and both those rosters top to bottom. I think that will be their toughest test, just to get out of that first round. And if they do, I think they'll have a lot of confidence. And I think the rest of it, they'll play well against Colorado. Colorado's a big rivalry, big games. So it'll be fun. It's not going to be an easy playoff run for the Wild, or really any team in the Central at this point. All the teams in the playoff mix have really proven that they can win games, and they can win big games, and they can play a tough, heavy game. Kind of with the exception of Dallas. Dallas is good, don't get me wrong, but I think that the Avalanche, the Blues, the Predators, and the Wild are just in in a different category. So against the Pacific, they're 11-7-2. Notable, they do not have a win against Calgary this year. I think they play Calgary one more time. Don't quote me on that. I don't have anything in front of me, but I thought they played Calgary again. That could be fun to watch. Calgary's been excellent. Calgary's a fun team to watch. But the Metro, right? 14-0-2. By far dominating the Metro, which is supposed to be the toughest division in hockey. I'm probably making a mistake by saying supposed to be. Is the toughest division in hockey. 6 of their 8 teams are at or above NHL 500. The 6th place team is St. Louis Blues, which are literally at 500. The Islanders are above 500. And then you have 4 playoff teams right there. It's, it's unbelievable. And then looking at the Atlantic, they're 8-5-3. They have losses against all the bottom dwelling teams in that division. That division's super split. But they've played really well against all the playoff teams in the Atlantic division. All of them in the Metro division. I think they're 1-0-1 against Tampa. The Wild are, and it's just it's interesting. It's intriguing. Like, this team has played really well against the Eastern Conference, which is significantly tougher than the Western Conference. Yet the Western Conference stats they're just not where you want them to be. You look at these two records for the Central and Pacific, and it makes you question, can they make a playoff run? Can they get past these teams? They're winning records, but they don't have great records in the respective divisions. So just fun stuff to look at. My prediction, they make a run. I think they win the first round. I think the first round's exciting. It's fun. You got this exciting team that is driven and doesn't give up and says never die. I think they get to Colorado. I think Colorado wins the first round too. I think this team, if they upset Colorado, and I think there's a good shot they do, they'll probably be in the Stanley Cup, assuming they get through the Central or the Pacific Division, Calgary, LA, whoever. And then once they're in the Stanley Cup, they have very good records against every playoff team in the playoffs, in the Eastern Conference. So don't count this Wild team out. I think the first 2 rounds, honestly, will be the toughest tests for the Wild. And then after that, it should be a little easier. It's not going to be easy. Obviously, Calgary can come in and just eliminate them. They don't have a win against Calgary this year. But the way they're built, the moves that Bill Guerin made, the way they gel, they mesh, they have chemistry. Guys can move up and down lines, and they'll still figure it out and work. You have like a defensive player coming up to make a play in the offensive zone. You always have a forward back being defensively responsible. The Wild don't have a lot of breakaways against them. They have solid defense, and it's been interesting. Their play has changed quite a bit. Up until the trade deadline, they were all offense. They kind of had to be. Their defense was good, but a lot of the defensive guys were driving into the offensive zone, trying to score points. Most notably, Goligoski, Dumba, Kulikov, Merrill. You see Brodin and Spurgeon every once in a while, but every defensive player hops up in the offensive zone. But the guys I just mentioned, Goligoski, Dumba, Kulikov, Merrill, were doing it frequently. So they've set back a little more. They're focusing more on defense. As a result, the goaltenders sure appreciate it, and they don't, like, the other teams don't get a lot of slot shots and high potential scoring area shots, which helps the goaltenders out a lot and gets you in a good position to win. But they've played good team defense in general, and that's what they've been focusing on. That's been, defense / goaltending has kind of been an issue for the Wild up until the trade deadline. And here they are. Since the trade deadline, they've been one of the best defensive teams in the league. since the trade deadline, they have the lowest goals against average at 1.67 goals against per game, which is incredible. Because they were giving up like close to 3 goals on average per game, or maybe even it was around 3 goals a game. So it's an incredible transition. The offense is still there. They still have a lot of scoring potential, a lot of firepower. So it's interesting to see how the Wild game has played and how that's shaping up to make them an even more difficult team in the playoffs. Yeah, you added the grit with Middleton and Delorier. You added a young, maybe excited player to be on a new team and prove himself. Great moves. But by focusing on that defensive aspect, that makes them even more difficult because they're so good offensively, and their offensive production hasn't dropped since the defensive players have been sitting back a bit more and playing more defense. So I'm excited. I think there's a lot of dimensions to this team. They can play almost anybody, any style of game, any type of game. They can play a fast game. They can play a slow game. They can play an offensive powerhouse game. They can play a defensive game. I'm excited for this team, honestly. I think of the Western Conference, the Wild at this point are my favorite. Colorado second, Calgary and like the Blues maybe tied for third. Colorado and Minnesota are close, but I think I'm going to take Minnesota over Colorado. That's where I'm at. Just, again, I watch every game of the Wild. It's just seeing how their game has transitioned. I feel pretty confident in saying that I have faith that this is the team to beat in the Western Conference. I know that's very controversial and everyone will have a different opinion, but I haven't seen a team play this well and this solid and this multi-dimensional in a long time. So it might be short-lived, but this is really exciting. It's an exciting time to be a Wild fan. Really hoping that the state of Minnesota gets some type of championship. Finally, that would be cool. So it's interesting. Just a quick note. I know it's 22 minutes so far, but kind of want to talk about the offseason as well. So it's going to be interesting because of the cap space, and I haven't done too much analysis into this. I'll do this probably in the offseason. I'll really look into salary caps and what they can do, what they can't, who they can sign, who they have to get rid of. So just a quick look. Jordy Benn's gone. Kulikov or Dumba, depending on how much cap they need to get rid of, might be gone. More likely Kulikov. You don't want to lose Dumba. Staple second-line defenseman on this team. He's been incredible. You don't want to lose him. He makes $6 million against the cap. It's not a terrible contract for what you're getting from him. That could be a thing. Fiala, we had that whole scenario with his restricted free agency last offseason. He only signed a 1-year contract. He's approaching being a point-per-game player. I don't think he'll hit that, but he's having a career year. So is he going to get a pay raise? And if so, the Wild probably can't afford to keep him. That's kind of the issue. You have Boldy and Gaudreau. I'm sure they stay. Delorier, Duhaime, I'm sure they stay. Bukestad will probably be gone. Jost, I'm interested to see with Jost. They might be just flipping him. Maybe getting a little extra production out of him from being with a new team, a new environment. Maybe he shows up in the playoffs. That would be cool. But you also have Marco Rossi, who should be in the lineup next season. And where do you put him? So I don't know. I think it's going to be an interesting offseason. Does Fleury re-sign, and what do you do? Do you bring up like Hunter Jones from the AHL to be the backup? The goalie situation is going to be a whole issue of its own. Not really an issue, but situation of its own. It's going to have to get figured out. So I think overall, Billy Guerin, I was going to say Dean Evason, but Bill Guerin has done a really good job managing the cap through the Parise and Suter buyout penalty next year. Because, again, the buyout penalty is significant next season, and then a little more the season after. So you got to find a way to work with that, and I think Garen's done a really nice job, especially in keeping a first-line defensive player for $2 million a year. He's older. His game's probably not going to get any better than it is. But it's already really good. So it's exciting. It's an exciting time to be the Wild fan. I feel a lot more confident now than I did when they bought out Parise and Suter, or really up until the trade deadline, that even with those buyout penalties, that they'll be able to sustain a winning franchise throughout those. It's not an easy thing to do, and it's really exciting and an incredible. It's an incredible achievement on Garen's part. So it's just, as a Wild fan, it's really exciting. So as a Bruins fan, this is the team I want, and this team scares me if we run into them in the playoffs. So that's it. That's all for that. I really wanted to look into the Wild. I'm a big Bruins fan too, and I watch a lot of random hockey games just because I love hockey. And there's a reason I'm doing a video on the Wild and not the Bruins or any other team. I think they have a real shot, and I think they're super underrated. I'm not saying go out and bet your house on it, but I think if you want a good payout on a bet, this is a good opportunity. They have a real chance. They're very underrated on the betting sites. Be fun to see what happens. If you made it this far, 26 minutes in, I appreciate it. Yeah, I love hockey. This team just really excites me. I can't believe I've been talking for 26 minutes. So that's it. Let me know what you guys think. If you have any questions, let me know. I'm here for it. All right, that's all I got. Thanks for watching again, guys. I appreciate it if you stuck with it, and I'll see you soon.